Well, fans can be the harshest critics, you know.
And they often are.
A wife is often the harshest critic of her husband.
I thought I was invincible. That's what you're trained to believe as a sports person.
There was 4 million people in Ireland who knew much more about managing football teams than I did. When it comes to music, I can spoof with the best.
Your sporting career is the best time you'll have, and you know you have to hang on to it for as long as you like, because everything else is pretty crappy.
And this is not lies. Stephen Rothschild has never spoken to Jim McGuinness in his life.
You're very welcome along to our Saturday panel. We're talking through some of the stories and themes of the sporting week. We've got Keith Long, Bohs manager, Jenny Murphy, Ireland Rugby International, and Colm Keys, Irish Independent GAA Correspondent, with us in studio. You're very welcome, folks. Just a reminder as well, we're live across YouTube, Facebook and Periscope as well. You can tweet us at Off The Ball or text us using the text number 53106. Keith, we'll just start with you. Obviously a disappointing result against Dundalk last night, but it's the first time I've been speaking to you throughout this Bohs season. And it's been pretty good so far, I'd imagine. I know you can't really take time to assess it in the middle of the year.
Yeah, we've started the season very well. We've had to adjust to having a new group of players this year, and they've come in and done exceptionally well so far. Disappointed last night with our performance against Dundalk at home. Another sellout crowd at Dalymount Park, which is fantastic. The crowds have been right behind the team all year. But we come up a little bit short against a really good and talented Dundalk side that have been, at the higher end of the table, winning leagues for the last 5-6 seasons. So it'd be a great experience for our younger players last night. So disappointed with how we performed, but ultimately, so far this season we've been pretty good.
What is the level that Dundalk are playing at right now? Because I know they started the season fairly slowly.
Yeah, well, with the exception of a little blip last week against Derry, where they've conceded 2 late goals, they've been on a good run. They won, I think, 7 out of the last 8 games. So they're starting to click and hit form now. They've got a lot of players back from injury. And I think they're still the team to beat. Obviously, there's a slightly different dynamic in terms of the table this year. You look at Shamrock Rovers, ourselves in third position. So Cork not quite firing on all cylinders just as yet. Waterford still in the mix. Derry, coming back from a disappointing season last year. Dundalk certainly are the team to beat, and they've clicked last night. Particularly, I felt it was a performance that our younger players can learn from. That's the level we need to be at every week. And, Dundalk, like I said, are an experienced team. They played in Europe. They've been winning leagues for the last 5 or 6 years, and obviously they're the team to beat.
Yeah, you mentioned the crowds at Dalymount so far this season. I see John O'Connor on Twitter last night was saying that year on year attendances at Dalymount are up 54%. What is it about this season that has encouraged people to either start going to Dalymount or start coming back to Dalymount?
Well, I think it's a combination of things, really. There's lots of good work being done in the community, in the background, from the volunteers of the club, the board of the club. We've engaged with our local community. It's more than just the result on the pitch on a Friday night at Dalymount. Lots of people come there for various different reasons, not just the football on the pitch. But I think, to be fair, the supporters are proud of their club. It's a big Dublin club and big club in Irish football with lots of history and lots of tradition. So they're proud to come and watch their team play. They obviously can identify with the team, and they can relate to the team in terms of the honesty and the endeavour that we show on the pitch. And all those things combined together, have made it a good feel-good factor around the club. We certainly feel we're going in the right direction. Like you said, gates are up. There's lots of people, disappointed on a Friday night, which is great. To a certain extent, Dalymount has its limits in terms of capacity, which is an issue for the club at the moment. And obviously, we've got to try and get to a new revamped Dalymount Park, and hopefully with an increased capacity, we can continue to grow the club.
Yeah, see, Dan MacDonald was saying if there's ever a good sign of touts outside the ground, it is last night, seeing people flogging tickets before last night's game. Like you touched on it there, there's already been some brilliant moments for Bohs this season. There's hopefully, from your perspective, more to come. And it's actually one of the things I wanted to touch on with all three of you this morning, or this afternoon, I should say, because Jurgen Klopp, more so before Tuesday night, I think it's fair to say, spoke about the difference between moments and the difference between trophies, and that being a Liverpool supporter and to a certain extent being involved with Liverpool has been about the moments this season and not just about the silverware. I'm not sure what you think, Jenny, when it comes to the moments versus trophies situation. Of course, you'd like to have both, but I really think, as a fan especially, moments are some of the things you trade off, really.
Yeah, we were speaking about it earlier, that you do, even as a fan, you remember where you are when those big moments happen, but sometimes those big moments involve silverware, so it's nice to get a bit of both. That kind of thing will, I think, bolster a team going forward. It's always nice to have, but I'm not going to lie, I probably prefer silverware to a few happy faces at the end of a match.
Yeah, it's fair to say that as a competitor, maybe it's ourselves, Colm, as journalists and in the media, we like to paint up the story just as much as who actually wins.
Well, if you take it in the GAA context, Owen, what would Mayo take at this stage? They've had lots and lots of great moments. They've been through some journey through this decade, but without any silverware apart from the recent league win at national level. So I'm sure if they could convert a lot of those moments into something much more tangible, they would, and no doubt Liverpool would be the same, because it's 2005 since their last meaningful was the League Cup win, maybe in 2012, but there's been so little silverware in that club that the time is now. And I honestly thought at the start of the week everything had slipped away from them, but it was such a momentous week for soccer at that level. To be a viewer, to be an armchair viewer watching Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday and even into Thursday, and even those of us that may not be drawn to it from a week-to-week basis, it was an incredible week, even down to the penalty shootout and the significance of that with Chelsea the other evening.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Keith?
I think moments are important, but ultimately you're judged by silverware, and Klopp has been at Liverpool for 4 seasons now, and the club and the team have progressively got better year on year. They're on the cusp of winning the Premier League potentially tomorrow, on the cusp of winning the Champions League, against Spurs, or competing obviously in the final. They're on the verge. Tuesday's result was fantastic. The performance was fantastic. You can see the connection, the identity that club has between the players and supporters. In a big global market that is the Premier League, it still hasn't lost, I suppose, its authenticity. As a club, the cameras flash to the stands. You see Kenny Dalglish arm in arm with other supporters of the club, which is great to see. But obviously, I think it's a great moment. It's a great week for football from that perspective. But obviously, Liverpool will be judged on silverware at the end of the day. And Jurgen Klopp, I'm sure, is ambitious as anybody and wants to put silverware on the table, something tangible at the end of your season, because that's what you set out at the start of every year, is to be successful, is to bring silverware to your club, and that's what Liverpool have a chance to do.
Moments may actually create those type of moments. Tuesday night may actually create more pressure for Liverpool. That if defeat makes it even, a potential defeat in the Champions League final makes Tuesday night even harder to absorb if they do lose, that they actually went as far as scoring 4 goals against Barcelona. All these great moments during the season, the late winner against Everton, the late winner last Saturday night against Newcastle, all their late interventions, and they may not amount to anything. So what do all those moments really count for at the end of the season if there's not something tangible? So in doing what they did last Tuesday, Liverpool have actually created probably more pressure for themselves.
That's a very unique problem for Liverpool, though, isn't it? And it's kind of harsh calling it an issue. Like, you would have to say that, particularly when it comes to top level football, 80% of teams can't be judged like that, really. I mean, it is a harsh way of judging things. Even from Tottenham's perspective, you do wonder if that's a fair way of judging the progress under Maurizio Pochettino. How do you judge progress if silverware is the only thing by which you judge things, I wonder?
I think you look at on the pitch, the actual performance that they put in, like they put themselves in a position. They were 3-0 down, and the fact that they had the composure, fantastic defence to push 3 goals past a world-class team like Barcelona. I think we can be sometimes too critical about what it was in the last minute, or it's better than nothing, and you'll take it, and it makes for exciting viewing. So I don't know, I think, and again, like similar, like you were saying, they have put a lot of pressure on themselves, but you can box that off, and you have a lot of highlights. As a player myself, you'll have those, we were capable of doing that, and that builds up when you're going into a match scenario. That gives you an awful lot of positive energy, and you're going into a game knowing what you're capable of and knowing what your teammates are capable of. So that kind of thing it can be kind of quite cohesive, the team going forward. Like, you know, that was difficult. Cop 3-0 down.
Yeah.
And having the faith and that I know we were talking about the goals all the time, but keeping Barcelona scoreless, that's something that the defenders are going to look at, and yeah, I think it's going to make for one very exciting.
It was some high wire act really to not to concede a goal, to have to commit so much going forward, pressing up higher, and not to concede a goal on Tuesday night was a phenomenal achievement for any team.
But that's the thing, the high wire act is an interesting one, because I wonder if there's a situation when you're getting hammered like that, if you're 3-0 down, where you're saying to yourself, screw it, let's throw caution to the wind, and there's a sort of getting off the shackles a little bit when it comes to that sort of situation, where it's not really the mounting of pressure anymore, it's this sort of situation where it's like, it's now or never.
Yeah, well, they had no option, they had to win, so in order to win, we need to score 3 goals, and they kind of went out and did it. The attack did their job, the defence did their job, and it worked out well.
For sure. One of the things that's been touched on quite a bit, Keith, as well over the past few days, especially when it comes to, I think actually it's fair to say it comes to both Liverpool and to Tottenham, is the squad mentality that they both have, and the prominence of some unsung heroes doing the business for them on both Tuesday and on Wednesday night. How difficult a job is that from Pochettino and from Klopp to actually make sure everybody who's not playing is really happy and therefore able to step in and do the business?
It can be difficult to keep your squad motivated. Obviously, some players play more than others. You know, that comes down to your man management skills, I suppose, in many ways. Obviously, they're highly paid footballers and they're professionals, and you know they have to do their jobs. But you know, keeping a squad together and as close knit and making everybody feel part of it, and they're important to the success of the team, is really important from a managerial point of view. And obviously, you know, Pochettino, Klopp, they've been able to do that, because when you look at Origi coming and scoring 2 goals on Tuesday, Mora getting a hat-trick on Wednesday for Spurs. You know, Mora has been more than a bit part player for Spurs this season, so he's contributed to the team very well. But I suppose, come back to your previous question about what is success. You know, success for Spurs surely has to be, you know, qualifying for Europe. They were able to do that. The shackles were off to a certain extent on Wednesday night, you know, and you know, to a certain extent, Ajax played into their hands. They were quite open. You listen to the music coming on. I think the Bob Marley tune was coming on at half time, and there was a sense of the job was done. Maybe they got a little bit complacent in the second half. And Spurs were able to exploit that, you know, and you know, it was really incredible scenes at the end of that game. Also, incredible scenes on Tuesday. You know, they call it the week of the comeback. It was fantastic for football. It's fantastic from you know, watching the games and having a passion for football, and seeing the teams, I suppose, play in the manner that they did. But you know, it's all relative. Like, success for Liverpool needs to be something tangible. Silverware. Liverpool need to win something this year, and they're on the cusp of that. Spurs maybe slightly different targets in terms of maybe Europe is their reward for a successful season.
Yeah, for sure. Like, just going back to the stuff you were saying there at the start of that answer, the idea of having those conversations with players and making them be bit part players but very successful players in that regard. How difficult are those conversations? Like, I'm sure you've had a couple of them yourself with players who want to be starting and want to be playing the full 90 minutes every single week.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult. It's one of the hardest things in management to do, is to leave people out of your team, leave them in the stand, not even on the bench. And you know, you have to have constant communication with players and make them feel involved, make them feel they're part of it, and they are part of it, because, you know, injuries, suspensions, you know, lack of form, lack of results, you know, there's opportunities, you know, at different times, and the players have to be ready. They have to be motivated, and that comes from within. And you know, whilst it's your job as a manager to get the best from the players, to try and give them everything that you can, you know, ultimately it has to come down to the individual as well. They have to take that responsibility that, you know, it's not always the manager's fault that they're not in the team. You know, sometimes they have to look in the mirror, and we're fortunate enough to have a group of players at Bohemians at the moment that do recognise that, and they understand that it starts with them. And you know, but it's a combination of things. You know, it is very, very difficult as a manager. It's one of the hardest things to do, is to leave a player out and to disappoint a player. And but we're doing it for the good of the team. We're not just doing it for the individual. And ultimately, that has to be your thinking when it comes to decisions.
It sounds from the way you're talking there that you see the role of a manager as a facilitator as much as anything else.
Yeah. Well, obviously, there's the role of a manager takes on many different, forms, I suppose. So yeah, facilitator is one of those. You have to make decisions. Difficult decisions need to be made in order for the good of the team and for the good of the club, and that's what we try and do. As long as you're honest with players up front and explain to them the situation and give them that respect, I think they'll give it back to you.
Yeah, for sure. How hands-on are you in the actual coaching and day-to-day with Bohs?
Yeah, well, listen, I'm there at every training session. Myself and Trevor work in tandem in that regard. We constantly communicate and assess what we need to do, based on the evidence of a Friday night's performance and the opposition that we play. We're absolutely, we've got a coaching team that are very influential. That my job as a manager is to, I've always felt that is to get the best people at your club that you possibly can, and give them the tools to get on with their job, and that's what I'm trying to do. And our boys have bought into what we're trying to do. They bought into the work ethic and the ethos of the club. They bought into our ideas, how we work them, how we want them to improve. And hopefully, we've seen the results and how things have improved consistently and steadily over my 5 years at the club. And like I said, myself and Trevor, Trevor's a fantastic coach. Really influential around the team, and we work in conjunction. It's worked really well for us so far, and hopefully that can continue. We'd like to obviously try and bring silverware and success to our own club, but recognising where we're coming from and the resources that we have.
So the reason why I ask about the hands-on thing is actually in the context of the Champions Cup final this evening. One of the Saracens players was interviewed about the Stuart Lancaster effect, and he was making the point that Stuart Lancaster, of course there were other situations that didn't allow him to succeed as England head coach, but he said one of the reasons was Stuart Lancaster himself just wasn't as happy being a head coach. He preferred to be hands-on, he preferred to be an actual coach in a specific part of the team or on the training pitch week or day after day after day, and he just wasn't getting that. And I know you've done a bit of coaching yourself. Is that something that you can get a lot more fulfillment out of, the actual hands-on dealing with players and dealing with tactics or whatever it may be, rather than the facilitating nature of being the top of the coaching ladder?
I think that it depends on the coach and how they kind of go about, but Stuart Lancaster's strengths from an outsider's point of view is that man management and getting to know the players, and every individual is different, and how you motivate and encourage and get the best out of them can vary from across the team. And if you're kind of taking a back seat to a certain extent and trying to coach overall, or those big wider structures, sometimes it can be more difficult to either get to know the players and their motivations, but also to have an impact if that's one of your strengths. So I can completely understand that. Like when you're talking to a lot of the Leinster players, they have such time and respect, and they love working with Stuart Lancaster, and one of that is he's very hands-on, clearly knows his stuff, and likes to be right in the mix of everything, which I personally enjoy doing as well. It's nice to get that direct relationship with a player as opposed to maybe taking a step back, and obviously then that makes it a little bit more difficult when you're having those conversations about dropping them or moving them to the bench or whatever it may be. But yeah, I think he's found a role that suits him, and there doesn't seem to be any egos at all with Cullen and Lancaster. They're not interested in media. Their job is to make Leinster as successful as possible, and the way they do it is together. I think we've got Cullen as a head coach, but I feel like he's not particularly bothered with that title to a certain extent.
I think it's always probably easier to be a number two. The book will never really stop with an assistant coach or a second in command. It will always stop with a manager or a head coach. So that's where the real responsibility. So in that sense, it is easier to get into the slipstream of a coach and work from there. Less pressure, out the gate a little bit more, a little bit earlier in the evening. Certainly in a GAA context, Stephen Rochford left 3 3 years with Mayo, and I would say is maybe enjoying his time coming out of Donegal. He's with Donegal now as a coach, and he's out of there a lot earlier. He doesn't have to maybe worry about the things that he had to worry about and concern himself with as Mayo manager. The bigger picture, the head coach or the manager will always take care of that. And sometimes second in commands, their reputation grow. Their reputation grows because of that, because, well, people feel, well, the real work has been done by the second in command. But when they get out there on their own and take the responsibility, it doesn't work. So being a manager or being a head coach in a club like Bohs or Leinster, that's where the real responsibility lies, and it's really down to them to delegate. So Keith says he's a facilitator, but the buck will stop with him.
Absolutely. Just to come in on that, there's a big difference between managing and coaching. You know, the roles are you know, people see them as the same, but they're not. There's a lot more responsibility on a manager. A coach can work day to day and on the training ground and under the spotlight a little bit, you know, and you know, there's lots of pressure on at all levels of sport, you know, in terms of management. But there is a complete difference between managing and coaching. And you know, you look at when I done my pro license many years ago. Andy Roxburgh came in, did a workshop, and they put up a couple of slides. And the attributes of a manager versus a coach, and
what are the differences that they said at that occasion?
God, you got me on the spot there. Like, listen, you gotta lead all the time. Alex Ferguson was one of them versus Pep Guardiola. You know, you got to lead all the time. You got to make difficult decisions. As a coach, you don't obviously have the final say. You can influence as a coach as opposed to, you know, direct as a manager. You know, so it's. There's a lot more responsibility. There's a lot more off the field stuff they have to deal with. You've got to manage up. You've got to manage downwards. You've got to, you know, got lots of different considerations. You know, certainly at Bohs we've got. We work very closely with our under-19 team, and you know, our under-17s and our partnership with St. Kevin's are really important to us as a club, in order to prosper and to grow and to bring players into our senior team. And all those responsibilities, you know, tend to fall on the manager's desk to a certain extent, you know. So
if the bus is late or the food isn't right, it's his fault. It's not the coach's fault. It's not even the logistic manager's fault. He has to address that. The manager or the head coach all the problems will come back to them. That's the nature of it. That's the nature of management.
Sounds great.
And it crosses, I'm sure it crosses all sports.
Absolutely.
And it's the same template the whole time, that the buck will stop with these people, not the coach. For those small problems, anything that needs to be ironed out, that's what they must do. Yeah,
and like, I think you touched on it there as well, Jenny, the idea of the relationship between the manager or the coach and the players. And it's something I want to get into here as well. This idea about that kind of personal touch that a manager or a coach may have with the players. Like, how important is that? Do you think it's better for them to kind of stay away and leave their personal problems or whatever it may be to themselves? Or do you think that they can actually play a part in that? Because ultimately, sport is a huge part of everybody's life.
I think, again, like for what works with me is I do like to get to know the person, not just maybe that coach. Like, as in when you're walking in, you're not just a rugby player. You play rugby. That's one facet. The same with coaching. You're much more than a coach or a manager. There's other areas of interest that you might be interested in too. So I think it's important to take that into consideration, because all these extra bits that a player or manager might have can positively affect the sporting aspect. I know I'm kind of getting into a roundabout way, but for me, getting to know the whole person and them the same, that's how they got the best out of me anyway. I wasn't just there to play rugby. I didn't just shut off the minute I took a foot on the field. I think getting to know players, and then other my teammates were kind of like, I'm not interested in your kids, or getting to know you, make me a better rugby player. That's your job. Boom. And that's a personal preference. So I kind of guess what works, and the fact that you've got Cullen, Lancaster, and then so many other different people working within. I'm picking Leinster now because it's something that I know probably the more comfortable talking about. You've got all these different people working together, and players find who they're comfortable with and will tend to work with them a little bit more closely. So I think it varies from person to person how you kind of.
I'm not sure how large the backroom team in Leinster Rugby would be, or Bohs, but certainly an intra-county GAA team will have anything up to 20 involved. That includes medical staff and various coaching staff, logistics, and possibly up to 25, 26 in some cases also. So that's a pretty big team to manage for any manager. I don't know what it's like for how many
Wouldn't be
you
quite
have
that high, but it probably
with you.
10 to 12, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a lot of management too for any coach or any head coach or manager to take care of too.
Yeah, and like the reason I bring it up is because Eamon Fitzmaurice in the Examiner yesterday was talking about this very subject. He says, as a manager, you have to become a trusted confidant for some players. In my time in charge of Kerry, I would have advised and supported players on a huge variety of things, from serious issues such as grief, illness, serious injury, relationships, to more practical matters such as helping players to secure suitable jobs and career advice, to more minor situations such as how to get a baby to sleep through the night. And I guess this is a very new phenomenon. It's not just in GAA, it's in every sport. And, you know, the emotional level of sports people at this point, we're only starting to become aware of this over the last 10, 20 years really, and it's something that Fitzmaurice has tapped into here, and I don't think you're too surprised to hear that, Colm.
No, and again, it crosses all sports. A happy person will be a happy player, and I'm sure that's the premise on which Eamon operated, and I would think he's probably an approachable man anyway in that respect. Just from dealing with him, I would think he would be an approachable person who would have somebody's interests in heart. And ultimately, if he has satisfaction in the dressing room and is able to iron out problems like that, or help in any way or assist in any way, he gets a better product out of it too. Apart from the natural desire to want to help someone, he knows that he's getting something more out of that. So wouldn't have been surprised to hear that. That probably goes on in most cases.
Yeah, Keith, you may have all those lists as well, but the additional thing you might have is, I guess, the international aspect of football as opposed to GAA. Like you've spoken in the past about players coming home from England disillusioned with football. I don't think the manager of Kerry often has to deal with people who are disillusioned with their very sport, but it is something you've had to deal with.
Yeah, very much so. I think it's very important that you build close relationships with your players, and we're dealing with players coming back from the UK all the time. In fact, it was a strategy of mine when at the end of the season, having lost some players, that we'll look for players with pedigree, look for players that are coming back from the UK, you know, that are young and hungry and dynamic and have probably something to prove. And you know, the problem with these guys coming back is that they get given a lot quite quickly. They're playing under 23s football. There's no real accountability, no real pressure on them. A lot of stuff is handed to them. So the values that they have, you know, we need to get them, you know, and reintegrate them and instill in them what we believe are firm values that will stand to them, you know, throughout the rest of their careers and lives, really. You know, it can be very difficult dealing with players coming back from the UK. They've had that rejection. They've always had nothing but success. A lot of our players have played underage football for their country at various levels, and you know, this is their first, I suppose, sense of hardship and, you know, rejection. You know, we're picking up the pieces for them a little bit, and it's to try and get into them that, you know, they're not failures. You know, they still have a lot more to offer. They still have other opportunities because it quite hasn't worked out for them initially. You know, there might be other ways to go back, you know, if that's what they choose to do or want to do later on. You know, that they might be a little bit more rounded in their approach, a little bit more mature. The fact that they're coming back into a league that is competitive and there is accountability for your performance on a Friday night. You know, we're instilling those beliefs and our values into the players to try and, you know, give them a platform to go and play, go and express themselves, and give them every chance an opportunity to get back away to the UK if that's what they want.
Sure.
You know, so they've had a knockback, they've had a taste of it. You know, it's a case of perseverance. You know, can they get back up and go again? And that's really, you know, what we're offering to players at our club, is that opportunity to come and play. And to try and perform at a level that is the best in its country, in our country. You know, it is professional football in Ireland, and you know, boys have done well. Generally speaking, they've come if they buy into what we ask them to do. You know, they do quite well at a club like Bohemians.
Do you find it easier to deal with that very specific problem, given your own playing career, given the fact that you did come home from Stoke and make it in the League of Ireland?
Well, it's a long time since I was away and come back home. But you know, a lot of the you know, I suppose it's intrinsic what players feel in terms of rejection and having to deal with that. You know, coming back home, some of them don't even have bank accounts. You know, they have no concept of you know, day to day, what, you know, outside of a football club where everything is pandered to and given to them. So, you know, my experiences as a player, yes, it helps because I can get inside their head and you know, sort of identify with that to a certain extent. But you know, really it's what we can give the players in terms of, you know, skills to help them, you know, get back on the horse as such, to go again, to realise that they, you know, it's an opportunity for them. You know, it's not really you know, them failing. It's not really rejection. It's an opportunity to maybe go again and maybe a little bit more mature, better prepared to have a career in the UK by virtue of the fact of playing in the league. You know, part of the problem is that they go away too early from our league in this country. You know, so we'd like to think that we can hold on to players a little bit longer so they're more mature going away to the UK, that they're not just, you know, going away as young kids, you know, and yeah, that's part of the issue with young players going away so early.
I did an interview with Lee Chin earlier this year where he recounted his slump in form, the Wexford hurler. He recounted his slump in form last year, and after one of their big games, I think it was the game against Galway, and they'd lost heavily, and he was really down on himself, and he picked up the phone and had a chat with Davy Fitzgerald, his manager, and Davy said, get into the car and come over to me in Clare. Davy's living in 6 Mile Bridge, and he said, stay a couple of nights. So Lee Chin got into the car, drove over to Clare, spent a couple of days with the manager in his house, played a game of golf, and they went out and they ate. And he says he came back certainly feeling a lot better from being away and getting out of Wexford. And it was Davy that identified that, obviously, through the conversation. He says, I did have a lift in form for the next game against, I think it was Kilkenny. He says, okay, I didn't come completely out of the slump, but it certainly helped me. So in that sense, the manager not only was willing to talk to him, he opened his doors for him. And I thought it was an interesting insight into a player-manager relationship at that level, certainly a very strong one, and that's been reflected in a lot of the interviews. Not every manager is like that. I do know of some inter-county managers who will keep a distance, but by and large, most of them will put that arm around the shoulder and see what they can do for a player who's feeling a little bit down or off or has some issue.
Well, when a manager or a coach kind of shows that they care, it can translate. You want to work for, you want to do your job and play well and perform anyway. But when you're given that level, you want to perform for them as well. It's not just for you. It's I want to do it for him. I want to do it for her, whatever it may be. And it just adds another level. So it's a very nice thing to do. But it's I think it's a performance thing as well. It's taking care of the whole human, and you're going to get a better performance out of them on the pitch.
Yeah.
Just coming back to that idea of perhaps footballers coming home from England and losing their love for the sport. Like, I know you've spoken after the last World Cup about falling out of love a little bit with rugby. How hard is it to actually get that back, to get that passion for your sport back?
I think you just have to kind of break it down into what made you fall in love with the sport in the first place, and it was the camaraderie and the crack and just back to basics and enjoying it. I kind of forgot that to a certain extent. I was in a very privileged position. I was able to play for my country in a sport that I loved at the highest level, and that World Cup, I did not enjoy it at all. Home World Cup, I felt sometimes guilty at times, not because people would kill to be in the position that I would have been in. So I decided to take a year out. You don't want to take up a jersey that you're not 100% invested in. Took a year out, got injured pretty badly, so been out for 16 months. But I think the injury definitely helped, because now that it was definitely taken from me, and I was forced to not be able to play, and now I'm just kind of chomping at the bit to try and just get back. So I'm looking forward to playing with my club again, looking forward to playing with my friends. even looking forward to doing some fitness sessions, which I never thought I'd say. And just like, again, taking it bit by bit, and then hopefully we'll see what happens.
So it's just a bit of distance really is all you needed?
Yeah, I think the build-up was so huge, and then it obviously, the event itself was, like, we didn't perform, we didn't do well, I didn't enjoy it, didn't enjoy patches of it, so I was like, no, I'll take a step back, not just for myself, but you want to be 100% doing something like that, and you want to really enjoy it and have a smile on your face when you're playing. So yeah, it was just take a little bit of step back, enjoy playing club rugby, get back into the swing of things. Obviously don't get injured while doing it. And then, see where it goes from there. So at the moment I'm still rehabbing away, fingers crossed. So I'll be in Santry this week, and hopefully I'll get some good news, and then maybe do a bit of sevens or something this summer. We'll see.
Well, fingers crossed, because like having guilt while playing for your country is a terrible emotion to have.
It was more that I was just, I'm not ecstatic to be here all the time. And during the games, obviously you love it. You forget about everything and you just enjoy playing. But it was those bits in between that I didn't really enjoy as much, and I wasn't playing the best rugby of my life either. It was a few different things, and then obviously stuff was going on in the background as well. So it was just a bit of a mess, and I kind of thought for myself, no, I want to get back to enjoying it, because I feel that's what's going to be better for me, and then if it's better for me, then in the long run it will be better for the team.
I was glad to hear you're almost there in terms of the rehab. We've got a couple of texts in. Thomas has been in touch to say, I was manager of an under-18 team. The amount of work I had to do in comparison to my 2 coaches was crazy. Fixtures, gear, keys, parents, lifts, sponsorship, meetings, suspensions, registration, email. Coaching was only about 10%, which is interesting. You can text us using the number 53106 or tweet us as well at Off The Ball. The final thing I just wanted to touch on, and I'll get your take on this first of all, Jenny, is the idea of identity and the connection between coaches and, say, their province, which is something we've spoken about quite a bit this week in the context of Munster. And Ronan O'Gara was suggesting in his column yesterday and on the show last night that perhaps Munster have lost a bit of their identity with the departure of Felix Jones and Jerry Flannery this week, or the announcement that they're leaving this week.
They've been part of, they've both 90 caps and 93 caps with the province. I think Flannery's been there since 2001 or 2, and Jones since 2009. So they've grown up and evolved as they've gone through the whole. They've been players. They've gone on to that coaching role. Some of them not straight. Well, Jones, I know, went kind of very much straight into the Munster role, and I do think it's a loss. It's a huge loss for Munster, but maybe in the long run for those guys, it would be better to get a taste of something else that maybe they can bring back to the province. And that's what O'Gara's done. He's done phenomenal with Racing, and now he's over with the Crusaders, and what he is going to learn from those years away and hopefully bring back to Ireland is huge. And maybe his old teammates Jones and Flannery have kind of looked across the different pastures, and maybe they've got their fill of learning from Munster, and they've done what they can with the province at the moment, and it's time for them to find something new or a different way of looking at it, and then maybe come back. They will be a loss, but there seems to be, they've got senior players in there with huge personality, fantastic leadership. It will be disappointing for the province, but I'm sure they have somebody coming in that will do a job.
Yeah, like it's something you can argue both ways. The idea that the connection to the province is very, very important, but also some people might argue that the best coach should just be in the role, and it doesn't matter where they're from. And I'm not sure what your take is on this, Keith, because you've obviously had to instill yourself into the Bohs culture since becoming manager there. And at the moment, it seems to me, on the outside looking in, the culture of Bohs and being a supporter of Bohs is as important as it has been in a very, very long time. So do you think it's important that ex-players who are coaching in a squad are kind of kept there, or are kind of kept around the club for as long as possible?
Yes, I think it's important that you have ex-players and involved in your setup if you possibly can. because obviously they have, an understanding of the club and an identity with the club and a passion for the club, and they can pass that on at whatever level. And we're lucky enough that we have Craig Sexton with our 19s who's played for the club and coached at the club, and now he's manager of a very successful under-19s team. And we have that throughout our age groups. We have people, ex-players, coaching teams. Owen Wearens with one of our underage teams at St. Kevin's as well, that's played at the first team with Bows. So I think it's really important that you have that shared identity and that shared responsibility, across the club. And obviously, if to grow and prosper, like I've absolutely embraced this job at Bows and really enjoy working for the football club, because I believe it's a great football club. I believe it's got huge potential, relative to the domestic game, professional football in this country. And I'm very proud to be the manager of Bohemians, and I think it's we can see that, in terms of performance of the teams. We do have a rich culture around the club, that is player driven, it's people orientated, and we've been successful as a result of that, and success, like I said, is relative, and hopefully we can continue to prosper, by doing some of the things that we have been successful for so far.
Yeah, for sure. And then just a final point on this column, like you'll have seen it down through the years as well, the influence of an outside manager in a county, and there are still some counties who like to cling to the idea that the manager has to be from within. Not naming any names, but Cork Footballers is one that comes to mind. Like it is something that works for you, and it gives you that added incentive if it's going well, but ultimately the quality of the manager or the quality of the coach is the most important thing.
Probably is, and in the week when one of only two managers to have coached or managed an All-Ireland winning football team, Eugene McGee, passed away. He was, and John O'Mahony, only two have ever done it in football to win an All-Ireland football title as an outsider, if we can call it that. And at the moment, there's only 6 managers in football who are either not from the county or not living with it, or have a connection, a deep connection like that. So 6 out of 31 is the lowest in many, many years, because at the beginning of the decade it was 17. There was 17 outside managers in football. There's only 2 in the Liam McCarthy Cup. So those numbers are very, very low, and it seems to be turning back to that identity or that inside knowledge, that the outside manager is becoming slightly less at intercounty level as far as I can see. Still pretty predominant at club level that an outsider will be brought in for expertise, or just the club is so limited that maybe they don't have the right person in place at the right time. So that can happen. But I do think it is important for counties. It is important for counties to retain that, unless it's a really, really good coach or manager with a good, successful background. But otherwise, I think that they should first be looking within.
Yeah, it certainly seems that way. Final point then, Jenny, we'll get your prediction. The unpredictable of all matches, really. The game of the decade, they're calling it, Saracens against Leinster this evening. Everybody that's been on the show this week has really predicted this one with caution, and I dare say you're going to do the same.
I'm gonna toe the party line, and I think it's going to be a 1-score game. I'm looking at that Saracens bench: Strettle, Wigglesworth, Vincent Koch. A lot of experience there, and a lot of younger players on the Leinster bench. I'm still going to go with Leinster by 5, but I think it's going to be very tough. The first 20 minutes, I think it's going to be very low scoring. I'm not too sure if Sarries are going to keep the ball, very similar to what they did against Munster. They put huge pressure on those chasers. So on the receivers, I don't think they're going to kick too much to Carney. I think they might ram it down Larmer's throat for a while and see what happens, and not really give Leinster that energy that they can sometimes generate from some of those big turnovers. But yeah, Leinster, and it's great. It's going to be Sean O'Brien and Jack McGrath's last game in blue. I'm sure he's going to rise to the occasion as well. He's been playing some absolutely fantastic rugby, so that took a long time to answer, but Leinster by 5.
No, but it's an interesting point though. So you expect them to do to Larmer what, say, England did to Keith Earls in the Aviva?
Yeah, I would imagine so. Leinster they're very good at compounding that pressure, and also they're okay with the opposition team having multiple phases. Defensively they're able to handle it. So getting that ball behind that defensive line and putting pressure, and when you've got someone like Strettle coming on as well early, that's going to be huge. And you've got big men in there starting like Will Skelton. Oh, he's an absolute giant. Now there's a little bit of a change up there. Skelton is coming on. Normally he'd be used as 60-minute plus player, which is huge impact coming off the bench, and you see an absolute monster coming on the field. So the fact that they changed for that, I'd imagine that probably wasn't ideal from a Sarri's point of view. But he's, I think, once we kind of, and then you've got someone like Billy and Mako Vinapola as well. These are big men. The fact is, though, Leinster are able to play. They're smart rugby players. They can play it right up the guts or whip it out wide. So I think it's going to be a big battle. Owen and Johnny Sexton is going to be huge, and then Barrett and Henshaw is going to be interesting as well. Just looking forward to seeing how they get on, but I think it's going to be an absolute cracker of a game.
Yeah, I think it very well will be. It's a 5 o'clock kickoff there at St James's Park. Jenny, Colm and Keith, thanks a million for coming in this afternoon. It's been great to chat to you. We'll take a quick break.
Join that conversation. Text us on 53106. Texts cost 30 cents.
Run for a laugh with your work colleagues in the Phoenix Park, Wednesday 22nd and Thursday 23rd of May at the Staff Relay Series with PwC. The Staff Relay Series with PwC is Ireland's biggest relay event and staff night out. Due to exceptional demand, a second night has been added. 5 people per team, 5 kilometres per relay leg, 5-star entertainment. Register your team at staffrelayseries.com.
If you're in business, you're always searching for a new way to cut costs and boost revenue. Here's one you won't want to miss: the new Advantage card from On Post Commerce. It saves you money when you purchase stamps and parcel label packs for your business, from the post office or online. So take the Advantage